Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm in Tokyo for ONE173 fight week. Today's been an edit day. Chris Cannon joining me, M2MMA crew in the house, virtually, of course. Guys, we had to build up to this incredible fight card or incredible combat sports weekend with the boxing, the UFC, and ONE all going down simultaneously. I'm obviously here covering ONE, been speaking to all the protagonists, so we wanted to go over that. Always a good chance to catch up with Chris. Usually we do this on a Monday. Today we're doing it on a Friday. Chris, how are you, man?
I'm good, mate. And yeah, I had to insist we had to do it on a Friday because, I mean, what an opportunity to get the man behind the scenes to talk about what's going on ONE Championship this week.
Yeah, it's been awesome so far. Hit the ground running. Arrived super early in the morning, got about 4 hours sleep from Kuala Lumpur, then went to the hotel, was told I couldn't check in. So just cracked on with work. And then we had straight away the press conference at the Hilton here in the Ariake area in Tokyo, which is by the water, which is really lovely. It's a little bit wintry, but really beautiful weather, sun out, sort of t-shirt and light jacket. So we go straight to the press conference. Nothing groundbreaking was said, really, like nothing too spicy, but some decent face-offs. Of course, the matches speak for themselves, really, don't they? We had the face-offs, and then I managed to speak to Nadaka, who they recently used to base the new Tekken game off his likeness. Technically, he's one of the best in the world. He's going for the inaugural Atomweight Championship, the men's belt for Muay Thai. And as Japanese fighters go, I mean, he's won a Raja title, he's won a Lumpini title, I think, as well. He's on a more than 30 fight winning streak. Technically, he's just unbelievable. So he's going to be up against Namsurin, who's Thai. Namsarin is the underdog for this one. That's going to be cool. So I spoke to him yesterday, and then today, so I spoke to him on the first day, then the next day was media day. Spoke to Superlek, Yuki Yoza, Stamp Fairtex, who's back in action after a chronic knee injury, bleach blonde hair. Superlek's rocking the bleach blonde hair as well. Kind of asked him if that unlocks his superhero powers. Does that mean that he's dialed in? Because last time we saw him with the bleach blonde was against Rodtang, and it was an all-time classic. Rod Tang we spoke to as well. Some great answers from him. Superbon, one of the best interviews there is, speaks impeccable English and is unafraid to say whatever's on his mind. Unbelievable self-belief. He was hailing Borkow because he used to come to Tokyo when Borkow was fighting in K1. And now Superbon's kind of the last of the previous generation, him and Marek Grigorian, who's fighting Anpo, who turned up looking like Lloyd Christmas off Dumb and Dumber. So there's lots of little subplots going on. I think my fight of the night, though, is going to be Yuki Yoza versus Superlek. A lot of talk about the low kicks, a lot of ego at stake. Yuki Yoza, the up and comer, I think, in terms of this generation. He's 27 years old, absolutely in his prime. Superlek, a couple of years older. He's not his first rodeo. He's done this dance many times. He's been on this stage many times. But he's now got something to prove. People asking if he's maybe fallen off after what happened in his last fight in Tokyo against Nabil Anan. So the stakes are high.
What do you think the atmosphere is like amongst the Japanese fans? Are they pumped for this event?
Massively, I'd say there were so many fans at the open workout, reams of them queuing up. And ONE Championship have really gone big on the Japanese market. I got a DM from somebody asking me why I think this is and why they've stacked this card so much. I think there are a number of reasons. Number one, I think we touched upon it on the last episode. There is an evolved pay-per-view culture in Japan, much more so than anywhere else in Asia. Japan has a very high GDP in comparison with countries in Southeast Asia, and they have such a rich history in terms of kickboxing. They show up, they buy tickets, they buy merchandise, they understand the game, they revere the heroes of the sport as well. Chatri's half Japanese himself. So there's many reasons for why I think ONE are doubling down on the Japanese market. Chatri was addressing the Japanese media at the press conference. He said it's hugely important for them. And they've been buying up K1 champions left, right, and center. There is a great narrative of Japan versus the rest of the world, Japan versus Thailand throughout the card. And it will be fascinating to see how successful this is. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a packed Ariake Arena. How many pay-per-views are they going to sell? That's the question, because if this is a success, it really puts a marker down and a way they can push forward. You know, they can do 2, 3 big Japanese cards each year because they have that roster. And I think when you have Japan versus foreigner, it's great. It carries so much interest around the world. There's one Japanese versus Japanese fight on the card, which is Itsuki Hirata against Chihiro Sawada. Itsuki Hirata is kind of climbing her way back into contention. She obviously looks amazing. She's got 500,000 followers, partially because she's very trendy, very stylish, and partially because she's a great fighter. But she was, when she was younger, a great judoka, was in contention to be up there challenging for the belt. Had a run of bad results, and now she's, if she beats Sawada, who's another great judoka, she'll be right back in the mixer at the top of the division. So she's another star. But just saying, it's interesting because I think the narrative of Japanese fighter versus foreign fighter is the best dynamic, and that's kind of what we saw in Pride back in the day as well. Versus if you just have Japanese versus Japanese.
And are they promoting that aspect behind it? I mean, again, I get the sense, and I might be wrong, you can tell me on this. Let's say in Japan or Thailand, for example, it's a little bit of a different promotional atmosphere than, let's say, the US, where they stoke the rivalries, they stoke the bad blood and so on. Is it different over there?
It's certainly different to the UFC. The UFC, I think, when you have this Western impetus towards trash talk, which peaked in the McGregor era, there is a different vibe altogether. In some regards, it does leave a bad taste in your mouth when you look at the beauty and history of a sport like Muay Thai, which is really built around respect, perhaps more than most martial arts. And when you see young fighters shoving each other in the face off, it just doesn't sit well, particularly when it seems put on. If it doesn't seem organic, authentic, and they're just shoving each other and they're both young guys, you kind of get the sense that they've been watching too much Conor McGregor, and that I don't like. But that said, when it is a bit spicy and it's genuine, that sets up a really intriguing fight because it does go too far the other way sometimes. How many instances have there been where I've interviewed a fighter and I've said, now, you are right in the mix. Like, who do you want to fight next? And it's primed, ready for them to call out the number one contender, and they just say, "Oh, you know, whoever the promotion want to give me." And it's really boring. It's not interesting at all. You've got to shoot your shot. You know, there's ways to do this. You don't have to insult someone's family to sell a fight. You don't have to insult someone's religion to sell a fight. But come on, show who you are, show some personality, a bit of bravado, a bit of confidence, a bit of self-belief, a bit of magic, a bit of charisma. These are all essential ingredients, an X factor that makes a great fighter. But I will say someone like Stamp Fairtex rarely talks trash about anybody, but she has everything. She's got the look, the style, the personality, the dancing, and the skills to back it up. Whenever you interview her, she's so likable, right? Everything she does is almost a piece of short form content, a TikTok. She's such a fun, cool character, and she's an absolute killer as well. So I think she is epitomizes what one want, which is charisma and talent without leaving the bad taste, without going too far. And if you look at Superlak and Yuki Yosa, the build up to that, that's been spicy without being too disrespectful. You know, Yuki Yosa said, maybe I'm the new kicking machine, which is, you know, that's pretty cheeky without being crossing the line. And you can tell, you know, Superlex said to me, oh, maybe the guy's talking so much because he's a bit scared of me. So it's a little bit intriguing. It definitely gets you more interested in the fight, but it's not disrespecting the sport. Nobody's disrespecting themselves and taking it across the line. So there's a balance, isn't there? And I think all promotions try to find that. Recently, there was an instance in Malaysia where a promotion got in trouble with the government, I think, because they had gone way too far with kind of scripted pushing and shoving, pro wrestling, you know, young guys just chucking coffees at each other. And it was like, come on, what are we doing here? So there's a fine line.
It's an interesting discussion because, as you rightly mentioned there, using the Stamp Fairtex example, there's such different personalities in these sports. And I think that's what makes it beautiful. And But I'm just interested because you certainly get the impression that it's expert in the Far East and One Championship is a slightly different way to promote fights than there is, as you said, in the West or UFC and so on. And, you know, getting into other events this weekend, talking about trash talk and bad blood, I want to get into the boxing because, you know, Eubank versus Benn earlier this year, obviously you had the very famous egg smashing incident and, you know, the historic, you know, not right, let's say that was more probably a slightly more respectful rivalry between the fathers, but certainly amongst the sons has definitely got into the bad blood territory. What's your thoughts on the fight this weekend?
I love it. It said that this could be Eubank's last, right? He's kind of played that down, but I love this legacy storyline in the fight. In the first go, remember when the car door opens and it's Chris Eubank Sr. For me, that was one of the most iconic walkout moments in the history of the sport because everybody watching knows what it's like to be somebody's son or daughter. It was the most relatable feeling in the world. An estranged father who's fallen out with the son, reconciling and realizing that in life, sometimes you've got to put it behind you, you've got to be bigger. And you could see what it meant to the son. And in that moment, he's more than this millionaire superstar fighter. He's just somebody's son. So that, for me, touched me. I think it touched millions as well. And then you've got the Dr. Dre, Still Dre tune. And then you've got Chris Eubank Sr. with all the charisma in the world. It was just such a big moment. So that underlying storyline and then seeing the face-off of father and son facing off with father and son, I think that's unbelievably cool. It's a promoter's dream and it's right there for the taking. Boxing does lend itself to a bit more trash talk, doesn't it? I mean, look at Mike Tyson down the years. And it also depends who you are, doesn't it? Because I feel like McGregor's gotten away with murder. Tyson, similarly, when you're the man and when you're winning, people will forgive anything. And also remember, it's important, are you pulling it off? It's just like when you make a joke that's politically incorrect. If you're funny, no topic is off limits. But if you're not funny, then the reaction is going to be, what are you doing? Why are you talking about that? So again, that's why these topics are not black and white. You know, it is possible to trash talk somebody, but if you do it with style and you're funny, you can go pretty far. It's all about case by case. You know, are you being authentic? Is it part of your personality, or are you clearly playing a role that you're not pulling off? This Ben Eubank one, as a fight, though, I'm leaning towards Eubank. I've always been a fan of his. I really like him. The public seems to have come around to him as well. He was kind of the heel for many years, and then the public seemed to embrace him. This dynamic between the public and the fighter, and the relationship between the fighter and the public. As a society, we seem to want to build people up and then knock them down. And it's only once we've seen them knocked down that we're willing to embrace them again. And as somebody who's involved in the storytelling of sports, that dynamic is always fascinating to me. And that captures the imagination. And it's important to capture the imagination, isn't it? To make people care, to make people relate. And we see that in boxing maybe more than any other.
Well, I think this is why it's such a big fight. As you rightly said, it's all the amazing storylines behind it. Because it's not a title fight, but it's all those things you just mentioned, all the reasons it matters to people. And you talk about Eubank there. What about Conor Benn with the drug test? You know, coming back from there, the reconciliation, you know, proving his innocence and coming back and fighting Eubank in this massive rivalry, two weight divisions up, and all the things involved in that. Again, I think people relate to that, and that's why you've got such passionate support behind either fighter. And going back to the trash talk side of things, you mentioned boxing. I think we've got to talk about Muhammad Ali, right? He was probably the OG of trash talking, but doing it in a way he could back it up, and where people laughed and revered him for it. And I think he started that way of promoting. And if you get it right, like you said, and you can back it up in the arena, in the ring, or in the cage, that's where superstardom lays waiting for you. And yeah, this fight for me, and also you talk about trash talk, you've got to talk about promoting as well, because Eddie Hearn for me is one of the greatest in the business. And, you know, we talk about rivalries that's coming in the future. I think this Eddie Hearn versus Dana White in the space of boxing, and how we're going to see trash talking between those two potentially. And, you know, Eddie does an incredible job of promoting these fights. And yeah, for me, this Eubank versus Benn in London again, What a fantastic event. And the first one was a special fight, and I can't wait to see it happen again. One of the interesting topics I wanted to get into this week is around weight cutting, and also the fact that we've got a number of massive fights taking place this weekend. Obviously, Maddalena is going up a weight class. We've got Eubank versus Benn, where again, Benn is going up 2 weight classes. Eubank is now restricted to a rehydration clause to make that happen, while both fighters are. And obviously going on to the UFC, we've got Islam Mackhachev going up a weight class to fight De La Maddalena. We've got Weili going up a weight class to fight Shevchenko. First of all, I love it because these people are making the big fights happen. But second of all, it's a really interesting aspect to talk about. How are these fighters going up a weight class going to perform? So what's your thoughts, firstly, let's go Weili going up a weight class to fight Shevchenko. Think she's going to be able to handle it?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to pretend that I know. You know, sometimes it's important to admit that you don't. I'm a huge Zhang Weili fan. I'm a huge Valentina Shevchenko fan.
We've got
I
to talk about
just,
that, a bit of Bangtao versus Tiger Muay Thai, which, is a
yeah,
historic rivalry there in Phuket.
big time. They're two gyms that we're very fond of as a promotion. We've seen great fighters from both gyms inside the M2MMA ring. And now it's fascinating that this all-time great women's MMA fight going down in MSG was born in Phuket, Thailand. Zhang Weili has got to be up there with the top 2 strawweights of all time. Valentina Shevchenko is in the clear as the best flyweight ever. You always lean, though, to the fighter who has the experience competing at that weight class because somebody jumping up is a total unknown quantity. You've got to say the same of Islam Makhachev, right? Not so long ago, he was in there with Alex Volkanovski, who's in the conversation for being a featherweight GOAT. Jack Della is a giant compared to Alex Volkanovski. So it's just different gravy. It's the same thing here, right? Nabil Anan, who I think one day will be the featherweight champion. He was supposed to fight Haggerty. Haggerty's out with a rotator cuff injury. So now new opponent for Nabil. He's now fighting kickboxing. He's now fighting at featherweight. But even he said, I've got to see how I absorb these shots. What damage can I do? What damage can I take at featherweight? It's different. There's a reason we have weight classes. When you get hit and when you hit, when you're jumping up, it's not the same anymore. So to answer your question, you've got to lean Valentina, but I think I'll never forget the moment when Zhang Weili said, "My name is Zhang Weili, remember me," in English in Shanghai when she won the belt. It was one of those moments that goes down in history for me. You know, there are the small moments. So if there's anyone who's capable of creating history again, creating the spectacular, it's her. I'd say it's about a 60-40 in favor of Valentina, though.
And would you lean the same way for Mackhachev versus De La Maddalena?
I actually do favour Jack in this one. He's had a fascinating career because he lost his first 2 fights. Again, you can see the way that I lean. I'm always drawn to storylines. Can you imagine how he would have felt after that second fight? Imagine how you would feel after losing your first 2 as a pro. Is this for me? Am I cut out for this? All those doubts creeping in your head. And then he went on this unbelievable winning run and has had a reign as the champion at welterweight in the UFC, looks unstoppable. And he's been training with Craig Jones, who seems to be the Dagestan kryptonite. So Jack Della is going to hit so hard in comparison with everything else that Islam has faced. Again, I think I lean 60-40 in favor of the Australian here, which sounds wild to count against Islam, one of the
I know,
greatest to
again,
ever do it.
it's so hard for me to go against Islam as well. You see these guys, they just look unbeatable, don't they? Some people just look unbeatable. But in the end, there's always one person they come up against who's got their number. Maybe this weekend is his weekend where, you know, I find it so intriguing. I love the fact, again, these guys are taking that leap to make these big fights happen, to step up and to challenge themselves. And I think that's where the argument against, let's say, Khabib as one of the greatest of all time was the fact that he didn't do that, right? That he went out on top, yes, but he never challenged himself up a weight class. To see Islam going up, like obviously McGregor in the past, and now obviously Pereira as well, to me, for his legacy, if he can pull this off, this has got to put him in the debate of one of the greatest of all time as well.
100%. 100%. I love that. Fighters who test themselves, they capture the imaginations of the fans, the journalists, everybody. This is what it's all about, to find out who's the best. But for me, I've got to be honest, I hate weight cutting. I wish it didn't exist in our sport. It's dangerous. You get fighters who are totally destroying their bodies and their brains. And at the end of the day, what happens? They enter the ring at more or less the same weight. What do I want to see as a spectacle? I want to see the best fight the best at their best. I don't want to see a guy who's destroyed himself in the sauna all night long, an absolute corpse walking to the octagon. God knows what he's done to his brain, and then try and face an absolute killer across from him who's been doing the same thing. We see huge fights fall off, millions of dollars lost, disappointed fans. For what? Why? Why is this still a part of our sport in 2025? Because it always has been? I would love to see it change. I would love to find a solution. No one's quite found a solution. The hydration testing in ONE looked like a potential solution, but it's far from perfect. We see fights fall off all the time. I personally would love us to find our own solution at M2MMA. Nobody knows the answer and can say unequivocally that this is the way forward. But this idea that you are weakening yourself, taking years off your life before you've even entered the arena is baffling to me, and I just wish it wasn't so.
And also, in our regards, the major aspect that how the brain struggles to absorb hips when it's dehydrated. I mean, it's one thing that, again, there's some early research on that, and I agree with you. Ultimately, once again, that data, I believe, and we believe at M2MMA, is the answer. I would love to get to a point where we can provide Andrew as a fighter. This is your ideal weight, firstly for performance, but also to be able to absorb strikes. But we have to integrate technology into training camps and do proper research to be able to understand that. I think it's the only solution, because right now, I agree with you, at the moment everyone's kind of somewhat shooting in the dark as to what they believe their best weight is at. That's why I also find it so interesting to see when fighters do go up a weight, because one could argue Alex Pereira is far more dangerous at light heavyweight than he was at middleweight. And could
It's a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah, well, because I'm saying, could Mackhachev be better at welterweight? Could Zhang Weili be better at flyweight? And we only see that when they do that, because you might find, yes, they're fighting a bigger individual than they fought previously, but maybe they're able to absorb strikes better because now they're properly hydrated. Maybe their power's better. Again, all these different aspects, but ultimately we need to be able to study that and provide these athletes with data. And, I've spoken to Nicole Ali from, a nutritionist who previously worked at the UFC/PI and Olympic Performance Center in America. And I do understand that it is difficult to actually perform these studies. But I think with the integration of technology with what we're looking to do at M2MMA, that I think over time we can start to provide these data points for athletes during their training points to actually help them understand what is their optimal weight to fight at, both for performance and for safety.
100%. As I said, it's 2025. So we don't necessarily need to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. We can and must evolve as a sport. You've
I
disappeared
agree.
there momentarily, Chris. Can you see me?
I'm
Okay.
back.
So so yeah, look, I think we have an opportunity here to lead the way, which is really exciting. It's not black and white. It's not easily solved, but I definitely think we can do better. Um, what's your pick for the weekend then? What fight are you most excited about?
Again, I think there's a little bit of bias involved in this, but I'm most excited about the boxing. And maybe because it's two English lads fighting each other in this historic rivalry that goes back to their fathers, all the interesting storylines you mentioned previously. I'm all about the titles, but sometimes the story is even better. And in this case, Eubank versus Benn 2, for me, that's my pick of the weekend that I'm most excited about. And yourself?
As I mentioned earlier, it's got to be Yuki Yosa versus Superlek. I'm a huge Superlek fan. Yuki Yosa is the new kid on the block in ONE championship. He's on a wonderful winning streak. He's exciting both in and outside of the ring. I touched on it earlier. Sometimes you see someone who's truly great get knocked down, and there's nothing more beautiful than seeing them rise again. And Superlek is looking to prove that he's still that guy. He's still the man. He's still under 30 years old. He's looking to prove that he's not finished because fans are so quick to write fighters off, aren't they? But he looks dialed in. He's got the bleached blonde hair. There's something very special about a locked-in Superlek, so I'm expecting a spectacle. And the other one has got to be Rodtang, Iron Man, the showman, against his friend, his football buddy, the legend that is Nong O, who's just turned 39 years old. He wants to show that at 39 you can still climb to the top of the mountain. As a guy who's 38, how cool would that be? What a rocky story. I'd give him about a 10% chance of making it happen, but I'm the kind of silly person who would take a 10% chance, you know? I think it would be just emotional if Nongo knocks out his friend Rodtang against all odds in Tokyo and becomes champion again. The romantic in me would love to see that happen. I don't know if it will, but let's see.
Awesome, mate. Well, I'm looking forward to catching up again on Monday, and we can chat all about what I'm expecting to be an incredible weekend of combat sports.
100%, man. Always a pleasure.
Cheers, mate.
Do you want